Joining us on the phone now, ESPN senior baseball writer Keith Law. He's the author of the new book, Smart Baseball, the story behind the old stats that are running the game, the new ones that are running it, and the right way to think about baseball. And Keith, we'll get into the book in a second, but first, let's talk Red Sox Yankees. 104.5, the team's the home for the Yankees here in the Capital Region. This rivalry, what needs it to be like it was back in the mid-2000s when it was the rivalry in baseball?
I think it was considered the rivalry because the media made it one. I mean, it's very regional. I've lived all over the country. I lived in Arizona for a couple of years. I've spent a lot of time in California. Nobody out there cared about the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry. I think that was very much a media creation, and getting out of the Northeast myself made it very clear to me that that wasn't that was very much a product of the Northeast media machine.
So that can't come back again, though? Like, what can make it a national rivalry if you don't believe it is a national rivalry?
Well, I don't think it's a national one. I don't think it ever was one. I don't know that baseball is necessarily geared towards that. We are a very regionalized sport. Now, if two teams were facing, like if the Cubs and Cleveland faced again in the World Series this year, you might see something like that develop. Two great organizations, two very well-run organizations, two early adopters of analytics, too, facing off in a couple of key postseason series. That's the kind of thing that might matter. But a New York-Boston thing doesn't really play in Peoria.
Now, Keith, we are the home for Yankees baseball here on 104.5 The Team, and Aaron Judge has been the talk of the town, basically. Is he going to be the most popular Yankee for years to come?
I don't know that I could speak to his popularity. I could tell you what kind of player I think he's going to be. I mean, I've been a big fan of his since he was at Fresno State, rated him as a mid-first rounder. He ended up slipping to the end of the round, which looks kind of crazy now. I haven't seen many people in a baseball uniform who are built like him. He looks like he should be playing football. He's just unbelievably strong, and I've really been impressed by the adjustments he's made at each level. He's moved up the ladder, closing up holes in his strike zone, tightening his plate discipline a little bit each time he moves up, struggling at first like he did in the 2 months he was up last year, coming back this season with an entirely tighter approach, more advanced approach, making better swing decisions at the plate. He'll always strike out a little bit too much, but there's 30-plus homer power in there, and I think he's going to get on base more than enough to make up for whatever he costs you with the swing and miss.
ESPN senior baseball writer Keith Law joining us here on the phone lines on 104.5 The Team. So what's more likely to happen in the AL East for the rest of the season? The New York Yankees stay in contention for a postseason berth, or the Toronto Blue Jays continue to struggle?
More likely is that the Yankees stay in contention. One, I don't think the Blue Jays team is that bad. Certainly if they stay hurt, they've had some major injury problems. That could certainly hold them back, and then they might make the decision at some point to sell. But I think if they get most of their players back, that they'll end up being at least competitive. Maybe they're not a wild card team like I thought they were going to be, but I think they should be much better the rest of the season.
Let's talk about this book that you have out, Smart Baseball, the story behind the old stats that are ruining the game, the ones that are running it in the right way to think about baseball. What inspired you to get behind this book?
The readers. The readers were asking me, my readers, followers on Twitter were asking me for years to recommend a book that ended up being this book, because I could not find something that was really for the lay audience that answered questions like, what are some of these new stats that you're referring to? Why do you say that wins and saves and RBIs are useless for evaluating a player? Is there something I can read that will help me get up to speed on this? And there wasn't really a book for the mass audience that would answer those questions. And I decided to try to tackle that. And it ended up sort of with some fortuitous timing in that MLB put out this StatCast product, this huge data stream they're providing to teams, that I was able to explain in one of the late chapters in the book, and then to talk to front office executives about what they think it means for the future of the sport.
Give us one of those stats that maybe an old school baseball fan may not know about, but a newer school baseball fan who follows these stats finds very important for a player's worth.
I discuss WOBA in one of the middle chapters of Smart Baseball, and it stands for weighted on base average. You can call it whatever you want. It's a replacement for the idea of how you'd have to look at multiple stats like on-base percentage and slugging percentage to get a picture of a hitter's total value on offense. Well, what weighted on-base average tries to do is looks at everything that the hitter does at the plate, a walk, a single, a double, a triple, even the outs that he makes, and assign weights to them based on all the current environment in baseball. How much is a double actually worth? How much is a homer worth? It's not worth 4 times as much as a single. It's worth kind of twice as much as a single, as it turns out. And averages all of those together to get you a single rate stat that kind of looks like batting average. If someone has a 400 weighted on base average, that's fantastic. He's going to be among the league leaders. If somebody's well under 300, he's probably either a great defensive player or he's about to lose his job.
Very interesting stuff there from Keith Law, ESPN senior baseball writer. What about the future of these stats? Like, give us a percentage. Are all GMs using this? Are some still resistant to this new era of using these advanced statistics?
Everyone's using them. All 30 front offices now have analytics departments. That's true in 2017 for the first time in baseball's history. Arizona and Minnesota were kind of the last holdouts. They had some front office changes in the fall, and they hired analytics directors and started building out actual departments. And all of the software and hardware architecture that you need to run a full-fledged analytics department now. The question now is the extent to which teams use that stuff. Some use that stuff heavily. Tampa Bay and Houston are probably among the leaders in using analytics. Some of them use it much less. Seattle absolutely uses analytics. They do rely on it, but to a lesser extent than a lot of other clubs.
What's next for you? Do we have another book on the way soon? Did you enjoy this? Was it too hard for you? What do we expect next from Keith Law?
I enjoyed it. I had always wanted to write a book, and I always said I wouldn't write a book until I found something that I could write a book that I would also want to read if I were a reader. And I hope I've achieved that. I've got some ideas floating around. I got a proposal with my agent for another book, but I can promise you one thing. It will not be a baseball book. I've got a lot of other interests. And, baseball is the full-time job, so if I'm going to do something on the side, I want it to be something that's a change of pace for me.
Well, give us a little hint there. What are some of the interests besides baseball you might be working on?
Well, people follow me on Twitter or read my personal blog. I'm a big food guy. I love coffee, particularly finding kind of high-end coffee, artisan coffee. I am a big board gamer. I go to Gen Con, which is the huge board game convention in Indianapolis every August, and review games for Pace Magazine. I love music. I've been doing a lot of music and movie reviews lately on my site. I'm an avid reader. I don't know that you could really write a book about books necessarily. I go through about 90 books a year on all my travels. So I try to live a pretty varied life, and it was a little weird last year that even in my spare time, I was still doing baseball.
Keith, we appreciate the time. He is ESPN senior baseball writer Keith Law. The story behind the old stats that are ruining the game, the new ones that are running it, and the right way to think about baseball. Make sure to check it out and grab it. Keith, appreciate the time, man.
Yep, my pleasure.